Good morning. This is CJ Holmes, founder of Homeowners for Justice, and bringing you a new Weekdays Live today about Banksterdom. And I've left this up on the screen. I want you to really read it. Instead of looking at the agenda, I'm going to bring that up in a minute. But this is about the people versus the banks. It is. Welcome to Banksterdom. But it's not over. And we can save ourselves. So keep watching. It's not all bad, but it is tough. It's tough, and we have to face the truth. If we don't face this, if we run and hide, it's over. It's over. There's a comment going to be made today that really has struck me, and that is the people will get as much tyranny as they will accept. We have to fight back against tyranny. Here we go. We'll start with the former Secretary of the Treasury joins LPS, that's Lender Processing Services. Jon Snow, you know it's a revolving door. You know it's a cartel. We have the banksters going round and round into the federal government. So Treasury secretaries, and it doesn't matter which administration. Let's get that out of our thinking forever. It doesn't matter who they've worked for. The whole concept is they keep the merry-go-round going, and they keep the divisiveness going to keep us fooled. So stop being fooled about that. He was a Treasury Secretary from 2003 to 2006, and now, of course, he joins the board of Lender Processing Services, if you will, forgery document mill extraordinaire. And just to remind you, LPS had owned DocX, and this is their fee for forged documents. It's on my website. I've stuck it on MERS mess because it's so involved with the MERS mess, how they make up documents. And we're going to be talking about these documents. These are mortgage assignments, deeds of trust assignments. Everyone in the country has assignments, and it's those assignments that we can challenge in court. And I'm going to talk about that because that's how we're going to save ourselves. Each individual is going to have to save themselves at some level. Then together we can work to save our country. But this is the forgery mill, and this is where they forge documents for a fee. So you'll notice, and just real briefly here, they can cure a defective mortgage for $12.95. That is the point, and that is what they've been doing, and that is how we can fight back. Now, of course, we've got to talk about Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase. When did he know it and what did he know? We already know that these banksters know what they are doing. They just can get away with it, at least they have so far, because they've got the Department of Justice, Eric Holder. Used to be Lanny Brunner, but he's no longer there. So they've got Eric Holder on their side. He is not going to prosecute them. They know this for a fact, and they use it. I really believe this discussion is great because now we're starting to see questions. We're seeing news reporters actually going to be talking to what did he know and when did he know it, and oh, by the way, you're a ratings agency, so what are you doing in the mix? Aren't you involved somehow? Let's listen to this for a minute.
Earlier this week, the Justice Department used internal emails in its lawsuit against Standard & Poor's. Now another trove of emails show JP Morgan may have known some mortgages were bad, but instead of disclosing these problems, the bank simply adjusted the reviews and then stuffed those mortgages into securities. Joining us to talk about what these internal emails tell us, Gary Fawn, CEO and president of Kroll Bond Rating Agency, and Mike Stalker, partner at the leading securities litigations firm Labaton Sutro. Gentlemen, very good to see you this morning, and thank you for joining us. How persuasive, this is one of the questions that's come up in the past few days, just how persuasive are these emails as evidence in a case against a firm like Standard & Poor's, as far as the Justice Department goes, and then in the story about J.P. Morgan today, showing that J.P. Morgan may have kind of, swept some problems under the rug when it was creating mortgage-backed securities.
Look, I think the financial services sector has really taken a hit this week. And the most damaging information, as you point out, really is from their own emails. J.P. Morgan's problem really comes from a case that was filed last year by the Dexia company. And what the emails show is that J.P. Morgan knew long before the financial crisis hit that the securities that it was packaging and selling to investors were trash and did not tell anybody, and in fact whitewashed its own internal conclusions about just how risky those securities were.
You want to comment?
Nope.
Well, no, but here, Jerry, here is a question for you, though. You worked at Moody's for 17 years, right? Until 2007.
Yes.
So some of the activity that the Justice Department says was taking place at Standard & Poor's, right, was coincident with your tenure at Moody's. Are you familiar with emails that may show similar things went on at Moody's that went on with at S&P?
I'm not familiar with many emails of that kind, and I'll tell you partly why, and maybe most people forgot, but Moody's was involved in a case with the DOJ back in 2001, in which they were accused of destroying evidence involving a case, an antitrust case. And they took to heart very quickly how important it is to protect emails and internal communication. So we had at Moody's very strict policies around the use of emails and other things. So you're not going to find quite the same use of emails at the same extent at Moody's, I believe. Not to say that they were not doing the same kinds of activities or similar things.
Oh,
they
that's
were just
fascinating.
they were just not expressing it in the same way.
So they really took to heart this idea that if you've got something bad to say, don't put it in an email.
Do not put an email, and yes, that's right.
Can I ask a dumb question then?
Sure.
All emails get reviewed by internal compliance. As soon as you use a foul word, it gets red flagged, your manager hears about it, you have an embarrassing conversation. How come those conversations happen when someone sends you a dirty joke, but these are massively incriminating, have to do with the business they were conducting? How come there's no managers who raise red flags here?
Well, here's a problem for them, and that is that however bad those emails were when they were written, it looks even worse when the emails are destroyed. So
that is true.
So yeah, there's not much that you can do about emails like that once they've emerged. But here's the real problem for both the credit rating agencies and for the financial services sector about these emails that have emerged. And that is that their story has been that the housing crisis and then the financial crisis that followed is something terrible that happened to them just out of the blue, just like it happened to taxpayers and investors throughout the United States, that it was a kind of terrible accident. But what's becoming more and more clear when we look at these emails is not only did they see this crisis coming, but they had a role in causing it.
So that raises, again, another question we've been wondering ever since Eric Holder stood up and talked about this case a couple of days ago, Jerry, which is why S&P? To your knowledge, were any of the credit rating companies doing anything different from S&P?
Well, I mean, the heart of the case with S&P, as I read it, is that they had ignored their own views about underlying RMBS ratings when rating CDOs that they knew were wrong. But if you look at it, they were also accused of, or at least alleged that they were actually bending their models. And part of this was a race to catch up with Moody's and other rating agencies to keep market share. So clearly there was...
Is that to say that Moody's models were just as bad as the ones that S&P created?
They were all...
Or wanted to create?
They were all using very similar models because they came up with the same levels, ultimately, same ratings on many of these securities. So something was clearly wrong with the models. There was little incentive to fix the models.
I see. So there's nothing... So let's say you were... I mean, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but it sounds to me as though the effort to try and duplicate Moody's bad models was actually the problem at S&P, and the fact that Moody's had bad models may not be in and of itself a crime.
Not necessarily, but that's what comes up in some of the evidence that they presented in this in the incident complaint.
What about the... Oh, sorry.
I was going to say the fact of the matter is there were smart analysts with integrity at all three of the major credit rating agencies before and during the financial crisis. The biggest problem was that their analysis was often being overridden by the politics involved in marketing and selling services to these giant banks who were issuing these securities. The marketing and the sales guys were basically overriding what the analysts had.
So then is it hate the game, not the player? These rating agencies were just trying to stay afloat, stay competitive, and the banks were to blame? Because if you weren't giving the banks the ratings they wanted, they were going to go to your next door neighbor and give them the business?
That's absolutely part of it, absolutely.
But is it kind of preposterous? I mean, if you read the complaint, you see that the Justice Department is suing S&P on behalf of the aggrieved parties. The aggrieved party, or one of the aggrieved parties, are the customers for the ratings, the banks themselves. We understand that the banks were pushing S&P, to give the gold seal, the AAA rating to these deals. How can the banks be an aggrieved party?
Look, make no mistake, both the credit rating agencies and the banks knew what was going on almost this whole time. The Department of Justice has been very clever in the way that they have written this complaint. They focused not on individual ratings and whether or not those ratings were accurate, but on S&P statements that it was objective. And what the Department of Justice is pointing out is, how can you say that you're objective when you're taking money in exchange for giving high ratings for really trashy securities?
Could one say that, yes, these emails, maybe they were off color, but maybe that's what the rating agencies truly believed? You were at the rating agencies at the time. Do you think people were really just doing their job?
Well, as Mike just pointed out, I believe that the analysts in the trenches, in fact, were trying to do the best job they could, and in fact, were yielding to some extent of pressure from management and the sales side. So yes, that's the heart of this case as well.
Jerry, thanks for joining us, and good to see you this morning. Jerry
Fahn,
Fahn, formerly of Moody's, now of Kroll Bond Ratings, and Mike Stocker of Labathon Suits Real Estate.
As we can tell, the whole issue is, it's not the people doing their jobs. They're doing their jobs. But it's the people in charge that are overriding the results. This is what the banks and, of course, the rating agencies were doing. And I thought it was classic, where you have now in black and white, well, in living color, the assurance that they knew what they were doing, and they knew it was wrong. And they've been knowing that for a long time. And this is the news that we have to get out to the people, to all of the people. People need to understand that this is intentional, and the results and the natural and logical consequences that we're going to be talking about here next are just the actual result of the creation of credit for private profit. When you allow, it's a moral hazard when private individuals can create credit for their own private gain. This is the end. This is the end result. And that's why I wanted to talk about it again and again. It's the people versus the banks. It really is. Now, if you haven't noticed what's going on, this is really Banksterdom. Banksterdom run amok, and this is the future. What I'm trying to do to people is to show you what I see coming, and to use everything that can happen to try to protect ourselves and to protect our country and the people in the country. When I say the country, I'm talking about us, the communities. I'm not really talking about trying to rescue the banksters. They're unfortunately doing that fairly well themselves. If you have not heard about this, you must pay attention, and I'm going to focus on this pretty much today, and then we're going to talk about how we can use some of the laws that are, rulings that are coming down to help save our homes. But here's the point. This is the first crack in the system. The system is starting to break apart, the money system, and what they're going to do and what they're starting to do in Cyprus is confiscate bank deposits. So this is what I mean when I talked about the level of tyranny that you and I are willing to accept. That's what we're going to get. So this is a trial program from the banks. You're going to hear someone say in just a few minutes, okay, they picked a country that nobody could even know where it was on the globe. It's had to be shown to 80% of the people. It's a real tiny little country. And most of the deposits there aren't even Cyprians, they're Russians. But nevertheless, they're starting to confiscate deposits in the banks. So this is what I'd like you to pay attention to, because this is a signal to the future. It's not hard to imagine this little fire over here starting a huge planet war.
My friends, for more than a decade, I have warned my radio listeners that the globalists, the private banking cartel that controls the planet to a great extent, was moving to establish regulations and laws worldwide to take private bank accounts, to take 401ks, to take stocks across the board in what they call a haircut of the general public. This is after-tax money. This isn't, oh, they claim you didn't pay taxes and then steal your money without due process. This is just take your money. Now, they already tried this a few years ago in Greece, and it caused a huge panic. Now they've actually done it in the Mediterranean country of Cyprus, where a lot of Europeans vacation and also retire. And they are taking 10% out of everyone's bank account. Well, actually, it's selectively enforced. But these are people that have already paid taxes. It is the European Union coming into their nation and levying an across-the-board 10% out of your bank account. So if you have $100 or 100 euros, that's 10 euros. If you have $1 billion, that's 100 million. If you have 1,000, that's 100. I mean, this is unbelievable. And of course, they're saying they're going to do it again. And we have the BBC report right there that breaks down the panic. Posted the article. We posted it at Infowars.com. It's excellent. And then we have the entire breakdown. And this is to back up debts of the mega banks themselves. Now, remember what Iceland did. Iceland, I'm going to cover that in a moment, they just said no for 2 years. The media said it was the people's debt, and then it turned out it was the foreign bank's debt. The British government tried to declare all 400,000 Icelanders terrorists because they weren't paying it, and tried to claim an embargo on letting them fly on British Airways. But all that imploded as well. The real terrorists were the globalist operatives, mainly British bankers from the Bank of England, that took over the country and signed them on to the tune of over $200,000 of debt per person to back up their private derivatives. But they just said no. So this is the model that is being pushed worldwide, and what they plan for here in the United States. That's why they're buying billions of bullets, setting up checkpoints, getting you used to it, militarizing police. The whole cashless society is about absolutely raping you. If you think Bank of America with $5 charges per debit or credit card transaction is bad, wait till they've gotten rid of cash. That's why I support gold and silver. And I support other fiat private currencies as well. It's just period. We need more diversity, more black market, as the establishment calls it, more of a free economy. Now you know why for decades, they're just now admitting it, they've had unlimited foreign spy agencies, not just U.S. spy agencies, but Interpol tied into all of your bank accounts, every transaction you make. Nixon was going to go to jail for having people's IRS records. Now your IRS records are shared throughout every federal agency for whoever wants them under Obamacare. And so they admit, when this came out a few days ago, that, oh yes, we've been watching you for years. But then the public kind of freaked out because they haven't passed a law yet to make this legal. And so they said, oh, no, now we're going to start. It's Obama's secret cybersecurity order that he says Congress can't see from last year. So just beyond 1984. Just type in Iceland arrest bankers, and you'll get all the articles about them last year, back in September, after a 2-year investigation. First, they called their bluff. It came out 92%, 93%, depending on which article, of the debt was not the Icelanders, and that their government ministers were really foreign banking agents, mainly Goldman Sachs and others. And so they just arrested them. and by the way, they now have the fastest growing economy in what is known as the whole Oceania, England, the United States, the islands out there in the Atlantic. They now have the fastest growing economy because they arrested the parasitic globalist, who again implode economies by design. They create the massive derivatives and then sign you onto them to control you. They could just triage it and write it off. We give $85 billion a month as Americans to foreign banks. Look that up. Truth is, MF Global stole $1.2 billion. Remember, this has been going on for over a year, and still many of the creditors of the $40 billion that just disappeared into a black hole, $40 billion Chapter 11, have not been given any of their money back. So understand, ladies and gentlemen, the whole police state is about robbing you and your family and getting away with it. In fact, if you type in Davos wants 100 trillion in new credit. You'll get the Financial Times of London from 2 years ago, as well as London Telegraph, where they're openly saying they're going to have new global cashless society controlled by a handful of families, and that you will have to then pay global carbon taxes and other taxes, Tobin taxes, wellhead taxes, digital money transfer taxes that are paid to them. I mean, this is rule by mega bankers. And that's the main problem. That's why nothing changes. I'll be covering this on the radio 4 to 6 Central today and back on the weekday show at Infowars.com. Please spread the word about this, because they can't get away with it unless they do these tests in Europe and nothing happens, nobody gets in trouble. The level of tyranny we will live under is the exact level we put up with, as Thomas Jefferson said. So being compliant only greases the skids. Acting like a sheep only brings the wolves.
Absolutely.